When I was a kid, under the age of 10, I lived with my mom and dad. My dad was gone looking for drugs or cheating on my mother a lot of the time. When my dad was home, I wasn't allowed to get up out of my bed or even open my eyes because he was walking around naked. I could hear pornography playing on the TV. Once, I just opened my eyes a little, because I was so bored I thought if I could just see something it would be better than that boring blackness in my head. I thought my dad wouldn't be able to tell I had my eyes opened, but I was wrong. He yelled at me aggressively, telling me to stop looking at him. I quickly closed my eyes. A year later we moved and my room was finally back into a hallway where I didn't have to experience that from before anymore, but then I noticed something else happening. At night, I'd hear thumping, and Mom yelling with fear in her voice. I noticed it more and more, and sometimes it was just him yelling, but other times I'd hear that thumping noise again. I knew it was something bad, but I never really understood it, until I saw my dad chasing my mother outside, swatting at her with a switch. After that I knew he was hitting her when I'd hear those thumping noises. I used to think every time, I hope this time she leaves him, and we get to live with my grandma where we can both be happy. I started being seen by a social worker a little after that, and she was a blessing to me and my mom. I ended up telling her the things I heard and I saw, and they were about to take me away from my mom because she didn't want to leave him. And then all at once we started living at my grandma's house. My dad threatened to cut my grandma's head off and burn the house to the ground. But my uncles protected us when he came. From then on, I lived with my grandma. Those were very special years I had with her. I was bullied in school though. By the entire class nearly. I was called gay. There was a girl who would tell me how ugly I was every single day. The more popular girls used to act like if they touched me they would catch a disease, unless they crossed their fingers. Once, we had to perform a dance, and one of those girls who were popular didn't want to touch me. So we did the dance without touching, and the teacher said that was excellent and different. But if only she knew how it made me feel, she wouldn't have said anything good about it. Also, I was bullied by a boy who sat behind me, and he didn't hit me or anything like that, but he would sit there and constantly tell me how much he hated me and why he hated me. But in 5th grade, I got in my first actual fight, and I won. They started treating me better after I did that. I was treated better by almost everyone after 5th grade and into middle school. Many girls asked me out, but I'd say no. I didn't trust anyone. I thought I was so ugly and that no one could ever like me. Even through high school, I had trust issues, and I didn't talk to anyone much. Later in my life, I said I love my family, but I hate the people in this world. And at the time, I meant it. Years later, my grandma died, and my whole world felt like it was turned upside down. I tried getting help, and I learned I have schizophrenia. I took medicine, and it helped me a lot, but the sadness and deep depression didn't go away. I eventually gained over 140 pounds, and I felt worse than ever. But one day, I noticed my uncle had been going to a church. I asked him if I could go. And he said yes. During that altar call, I felt like I was supposed to go and get saved, but I was confused, and I didn't know what to do because of all the pain I've experienced. But then, the pastor called my uncle to stand at that altar. I felt that tug at my heart even more now. The pastor started a slow count to 3. He said a few words and said, 1. In a loud voice. Said a few more words. 2. In that same loud voice, and said, please don't leave like you come. I felt a little fear, that if I heard 3, I would not make it. So I put away all my fears, all my worries, all my pain from my mind, and just forgot about it for a minute. I walked to the altar. Even though it was my first time seeing the inside of a church service, since I was only 6 years old. That pastor asked me if I wanted to get saved, and I said yes. He handed me the microphone, and told me to say, I'm born again. And I said it. Everyone clapped and cheered for me. From then on, I slowly started to love others, and care more than I ever did before. I started to testify in church. People always said they loved hearing my testimonies, because they knew it was from my heart. Then I moved, and I lived with my Uncle Daryl for almost 2 full years. He kept telling me about Steven Slate drums. He never would buy anything like that for himself, so I got it for him for Christmas. I knew that year, that Christmas would be very special. Until I heard my mom talking on the phone on December 15th. I heard, he's not breathing. We rushed to see if he was okay. By the time we got there, the coroner was already there, and Daryl's body was lying outside on the sidewalk in a body bag. I started to feel that depression taking hold of me again. But I noticed, I lived within walking distance from a church. I was curious about it. One day, I started going to it, and I learned it was a really good church. Slowly, I started growing in the Spirit of God again. One day, I told the pastor I was called to preach. On a Wednesday night, on my birthday of all days, I preached for the very first time. I've been much closer to God than ever before since that day. I take my faith more seriously, and I'm happier than I've ever been in my life.